This is not our war. We will not be drawn into the conflict.
A few moments later.
I'm revealing details of a recent military operation undertaken by Russia. Increased Russian activity in the Atlantic, north of the UK. This operation involved a Russian Akula-class attack submarine.
I told you. What did I tell you? Didn't I tell you? 'Cause I told you. And when did I tell you? A long time ago. And what did I say will happen when I told you? Exactly what just happened.
So it's no secret that America's NATO allies have largely been a joke throughout this conflict, and President Trump has sent them repeated warning signs to get their act together. Clearly, they've not done so, and something really interesting is happening right now, which is that other countries around the world, Russia in particular, the big bad enemy that Europe claims to hate so much, is starting to notice that weakness and is pouncing on it. And it's funny how that works, because despite Europe's calls for pacifism and cooperation and peace and a ceasefire, notice how that didn't garner them any respect in the international community. Rather, this strategy of appeasement has just created a vacuum where other countries are realizing they can take advantage of the Europeans. And there's a very good point that needs to be made about that, which is that there is no actual virtue in calling for pacifism or peace when you have no ability to fight, right? It's very easy to be the weak power and say, oh, well, we want people to stop fighting because we couldn't win a fight. You're not doing that out of nobility or virtue. It's not a good moral thing for you. You're simply doing that out of the sense of self-preservation. It's only when you are the strong lion on the block, the people you know have the capacity to fight and absolutely could do it, but are sparing people, are calling for mercy or whatever, only in that case is anything taken seriously. There's a reason why, for example, Europe has not really been a key factor in any peace negotiation around the world as of late. Gaza last year, Russia, Ukraine, this current ceasefire that they're claiming credit for, but it's very clear that it was America involved here. It was China, you could argue, to a much larger extent. But to make a long story short, Europe did nothing. They absolutely did not influence this decision whatsoever. Why? Because nobody's taking them seriously. And by the way, as it pertains right now to a country like Russia, Russia understands. President Trump's made it very clear, due to NATO's delinquent behavior, due to their mistreatment of the United States, America's no longer going to be there to help you. And what is Vladimir Putin currently now doing to our so-called European allies? Humiliating them on the global stage in many ways. Apparently, we have reports this week of Russian submarines spying on British military infrastructure. Britain, by the way, threatened to seize Russian oil tankers that passed through the British Channel. So what did Russia do? Just start sending their warships to escort Russian tankers through the British Channel. And guess what the UK has done about it? Absolutely nothing. And that shouldn't be much of a surprise, because Keir Starmer's not just weak when it comes to Iran. I think this is a greater, deeper thing going on where, again, these countries are just beginning to notice, oh, Europe doesn't do anything. Oh, all they do is issue strongly worded statements. We can take full advantage of these people. They have not been listening to President Trump in terms of getting serious about their defense or really establishing a true foreign policy that involves something more than statements to the UN or statements from the EU. Oh, we can totally do this. Hilarious how that works. Hilarious too, by the way, how liberals around the world try to claim that the European leaders are the ones who are tough on Russia and Trump is Putin's stooge, Trump is Putin's puppet. Well, as we talked about in our last video, actually, when you break it down, the only country in the world pursuing a serious anti-Russia foreign policy, despite the fact that maybe Trump and Putin personally get along better, is actually the United States, right? It's America who toppled Venezuela. It's America who went after Iran to Europe's protests, despite the fact Iran is Russia's top military ally. These people are completely unserious. They just like to virtue signal about Ukraine. And by the way, we know that because the moment the Russian Navy, literal warships, are sailing across the British Channel right now, notice how the UK is not doing anything. Notice how the UK is not backing up on their empty threats. Yeah, that's kind of how this whole thing goes. And so if you're the UK right now, what are you going to do? You're going to call America to come help? I think it's pretty clear America has no interest right now in helping you against Russia because Europe created this security disaster for themselves. And by the way, who tried to warn you? Who tried to tell you the entire time this was going to happen? That is, of course, Donald Trump. But we'll tell you about that. That's the main story. But folks, it doesn't even stop there because halfway across the world, I don't know who has thought of the Falkland Islands as of late, right? We haven't even heard about that since the 1980s. But right now, Argentina is quietly joining forces with Chile to once again try to diplomatically reassert political control over the islands. Now, you may remember it was basically the last cool, great moment of the British Empire when they defended the Falklands. But folks, we don't have Margaret Thatcher in power right now. This is Keir Starmer. If Argentina decides they want to do something, is Keir going to send his troops? America, as you can clearly tell, has no interest in defending the UK at this point, right? It's hey, again, mutually assured destruction. You know, you didn't help us, we're not going to help you. At this point, it wouldn't surprise me if Keir Starmer simply surrendered the Falklands to Argentina in the name of some type of leftist anti-imperialism. I mean, this is a complete disaster. And I want to make it clear, I'm not saying any of this with resentment toward the UK or the British people. I want them to succeed, but this needs to be a serious wake-up call moment, right? It needs to be that moment where we say, okay, our armed forces have become a joke. The once great Royal Navy that literally used to rule the world is something like 5 warships at this point. We need to get our act together. And by the way, we need regime change in this country, which is pretty inevitably here going to come very soon from the standpoint of political leadership. We'll talk about that. Anyways, let's get into this full story right now, right? Again, Russia currently harassing the UK in their own territorial and international waters, and the UK doing absolutely nothing. NATO, where are you at? Oh, funny. Without the United States getting involved, notice how Russia just gets to dog walk these people. Yeah. All right. That said, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. That's the best way to support our work. It also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And that said, I want to read a pretty hilarious statement coming from Keir Starmer as of late. And it reads, and I quote, "Our armed forces are among the best in the world." Really? Well, you know, maybe they historically were. We hope they are again. But I would point out that clearly seems to not be true. I mean, it's worth noting, by the way, you may remember that at the beginning of Operation Epic Fury, British military bases, I believe it was in Cyprus, started to come under fire from ballistic missiles, and Britain couldn't even go there and back up their own troops. They needed to ask France and Germany for help when it came to, I believe they borrowed a warship from Germany, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure if that's proof of strong armed forces. By the way, it's very interesting to point out, despite your pacifism, despite you claiming you weren't involved in the conflict, notice how Iran started to attack you anyway. It's almost like they smelled blood in the water, almost like they smelled weakness in your calls that you weren't going to get involved in and actually mean anything, right? Because they're not backed up by any real ability to actually get involved, and that's our point. Furthermore, as you may know, the Royal Navy has recently deployed a destroyer here called the HMS Dragon. But if you maybe heard this story, apparently the HMS Dragon couldn't even get its own freshwater production capacity working, and basically within days of the deployment, which in itself, deploying one destroyer took a bunch of work on behalf of the British Armed Forces, they had to already send it back, and currently, once again, are relying on Germany for borrowing their own warships. This is crazy, guys. This is insane to think the once mighty Great Britain currently is in this dismal of a military state. But of course, that is what years of mismanagement, even before Starmer, have created for the United Kingdom.
The Royal Navy to the rescue. Breaking news. Remember HMS Dragon, that warship? They took 3 weeks to get to Cyprus, allegedly to defend our air bases there. 3 weeks it took them. Well, it's now in the Eastern Mediterranean. Slight problem, though. It's broken down. The Ministry of Defence said HMS Dragon is undertaking a routine logistics stop and short maintenance period with a warship that's broken down. That wasn't part of their statement, that was me. HMS Dragon has broken down. You couldn't make it up. We'll talk about that in a little while.
Yeah, I mean, folks, you cannot make this up. Seems like a lot of Trump's arguments about the European countries completely being delinquent on defense are correct here. And how useful of allies, by the way, for America. It took them 3 weeks to deploy one single destroyer, and basically the moment it got out into the water, it already broke down. How horribly is the British military being mismanaged? Well, I think we know the answer there, and it's pretty bad, okay? And that brings me back to my point. The UK didn't take the stance of non-intervention out of principle. They took that stance because their military was in absolutely no position to intervene. And guess what? Iran knew that. That's why they started launching missiles at European countries. You might have thought even back then. Actually, I think we thought back then. That's a really bad idea. Why would you drag them into the conflict? Perhaps they understood it would have been impossible for these European countries to even join the conflict because it takes 3 weeks to deploy one single destroyer and already breaks down. What are they going to do to Iran? Nothing. It's a joke. And it's not just Iran who's noticing that. Okay, Europe could argue Iran's not their fight, fine, whatever. They do, however, lecture us nonstop about how Russia is their fight. As a matter of fact, one of the longtime criticisms we repeat of President Trump from liberals, both in America and in Europe, is that he's too soft on Russia. Well, guess who is currently noticing how dysfunctional the British military is? That is Vladimir Putin, who is eating Keir Starmer's lunch right in front of him. And to a certain degree, you almost have to say that Keir deserves it because the wake-up call here, frankly, is necessary, right? I don't want people to say, oh, that means you're rooting for Russia. No, I'm just simply pointing out this is a reality check and it's sort of necessary, frankly. And I 100% hope America does nothing about this. As a matter of fact, Trump should tell Putin if the issue ever arises, hey, that's not my problem. I'm turning a blind eye. We'll see what the UK is going to do because this is necessary, right? You got to discipline your child, I guess, once in a while in this case, because ladies and gentlemen, as of late, Keir Starmer has been threatening Russia over oil tankers that are passing through the British Channel, basically saying, hey, you're not allowed to do that. That's illegal. And so what did Vladimir Putin respond by doing? Actually, he did threaten that he would seize Russian oil tankers if they kept passing close to British waters. And guess what guess what Vladimir Putin did, ladies and gentlemen? Instead of standing down or respecting the strongly worded statement by the UK, rather, as you can see, he just started sending his own warships through the British Channel. You cannot make that up, right? Sir Keir Starmer's threat to seize sanctioned Russian oil tankers has been directly defied by Vladimir Putin after Moscow sent a warship to escort 2 vessels through the English Channel. If that's not the biggest middle finger ever, if that's not the "we don't respect you" statement ever, I don't know what is. I mean, that's just pretty shocking, frankly. And it doesn't stop there, because apparently today the British Defense Secretary held a whole big press conference about how Russia is now sending its submarines to basically spy on underwater cables belonging to the UK and Norway. And he's saying this is unacceptable. We're not going to tolerate this. But I totally agree. You shouldn't tolerate that. But my question to Britain then is, well, what are you going to do about that? What can you do about that besides call America for help? Oh, America has made it clear we don't want to help you because of the situation you've created. And notice how when you're on your own, you're not doing so well. You're not really standing on your own 2 feet. Nonetheless, take a listen here. Apparently, again, in the power vacuum of the UK and these European countries making it super clear that they're a joke militarily, that they're paper tigers, notice how the sharks are starting to smell blood in the water. It's kind of funny to watch, honestly.
I'm revealing details of a recent military operation undertaken by Russia. And in doing so, I'm doing this to expose the continuing Russian activity that threatens us in the UK and to highlight our constant readiness to respond. In the last few weeks, while the eyes of many were trained on the Middle East, the UK, in partnership with Norway and other allies, have responded to increased Russian activity in the Atlantic north of the UK. This operation involved a Russian Akula-class attack submarine and a concurrent deployment of 2 specialist submarines from Gugi. That's Russia's main directorate for deep-sea research. And last November, I outlined how these Gugi units, including the spy ship Yantar, are vessels directed by President Putin to conduct hybrid warfare activities against the UK and our allies, specifically around critical undersea infrastructure. They're designed to survey underwater infrastructure during peacetime and sabotage it in conflict. In response to the Russian submarines, I can confirm that I deployed our armed forces to track and to deter any malign activity by these vessels. a Royal Navy warship and Royal Air Force P-8 aircraft, alongside allies, ensured that the Russian submarines were monitored 24/7. The Akula submarine subsequently retreated home, having been closely tracked throughout, and we continued to monitor the two Gugi submarines in and around wider UK waters. Our armed forces left them in no doubt that they were being monitored, that their movements were not covert, as President Putin planned, and that their attempted secret operation had been exposed.
Okay, so at the very least, you allegedly managed to make these Russian submarines turn around, and congratulations, I suppose. But here's the thing. It's been documented that they were doing this underwater surveillance for more than a month. I think they already got the information they needed, and I'm not sure they were necessarily trying to be covert about it, frankly, right? I don't think this was some secret mission they maybe were trying to hide from the UK. Given the fact that they're publicly selling warships through your channel, I don't think it's actually a secretive thing. I think they're trying to basically give you the middle finger to your face. They're trying to make a point. They're trying to act bold and make a statement and see what you're going to do, and notice how you're not really doing anything. Oh, at best, we're going to send our ships to monitor the situation. Oh yeah, just like you are in the Middle East, you're just monitoring the situation. You know, I'm not sure that that's really all that scary in the eyes of Russia. I think obviously he knows who he's messing with, and it's really a paper tiger, and maybe historically America would have came to bail out the UK, and that's what would have deterred a situation like this. But Putin is well familiar with that relationship is like right now, so he's just saying, okay, you know, let's start messing with them and see what they do. And notice how the supposedly super tough, super strong anti-Putin European liberals aren't doing jack about it. It's a joke, right? By the way, who actually seized Russian oil tankers? Let's not forget this. After Operation Epic Fury, the United States of America did. Let's not forget that. Let's not forget who had to pressure the UK to even allow us to use the joint military base in order to seize those tankers. It was the United States of America. And notice how, now that America's off the table, as these Russian tankers you vowed to seize are going through your channel, you're not doing anything, right? And yet they say Trump is the one who doesn't back up the words. Trump is the one they refer to as Taco. Funny how that works. By the way, as it pertains to this issue of Arctic security in the North Sea going into the 21st century, which we agree, by the way, with the UK here is completely important. You can clearly tell how strategically useful that is for Russia. That who is the US president who was trying to get Europe to get serious about Arctic security? Who did the whole thing over Greenland that you guys called him crazy for, but ultimately was about this very Arctic security issue? Oh, that's right. It was, of course, Donald Trump, right? But you kicked him to the side, and look what's happening to you now. And what are you going to do about it, UK, right? You're gonna use your own navy against Russia? We've kind of established, sadly, right now, somehow the UK of all countries does not really have much of a navy. You're gonna call on the European countries to help you? Oh, you can tell I don't think they're much better, right? And certainly at this point, please don't call America to help you, because we've been over that point time and time again. Yeah, we know how we feel about that. But folks, it doesn't even stop there, okay? Because you notice all of the sudden, after doing so much grandstanding, we have leaders like Chancellor Merz of Germany suddenly now, within the days after Russia started to get caught harassing and giving big middle fingers to Europe, suddenly now they're coming out and saying they do not want a division of NATO, right? Funny how that works. Funny how when Russia once again is beating down their necks, they're like, oh, wait a minute, we can't do anything about it. America, please come save us again, right? Sorry, I don't know if you keep behaving like this, if America's going to be picking up the phone in the future. I'm just saying.
Ich will keine Spaltung der NATO. Die NATO ist ein Garant unserer Sicherheit, auch und vor allem in Europa. Wir müssen hier weiter kühlen Kopf bewahren.
Yeah, funny how they start to say that only when Russia begins harassing them, right? And look, the door is still open. I wouldn't say it's over for NATO, but it's going to require some very serious changing of attitudes and changings of actions. And the door is closing by the minute, right? Something has to give here. And I'd point out, as it pertains to the UK, believe it or not, it is not just Russia that is sensing weakness here and taking advantage of it. So if you think this is maybe just a flexing strategy, Putin is maybe not in line with reality, I would point out halfway across the world, the same thing is happening over in Argentina as it pertains to the Falkland Islands. Oh no, here we go, right? Hearing those words might even ring some nostalgia in a lot of people. For our younger audience, the Falkland Islands is a small island chain off the coast of Argentina that historically has had a population of British people. There is no indigenous population on the island. It's a part of British territory. Back in 2013, they held a referendum asking if they still wanted to be British. By 99.8% of a margin, they voted yes. Okay, so the Falklands are British, so don't get me wrong, right? I'm not by any means some type of third world anti-colonialist who says, oh, the Falklands should belong to Argentina. No, even if it's the last remnant that the British Empire has, I say that should stand, right? And Britain should do a job to defend it because it is their territory. So essentially what happened back in the 1980s is that a far-right military junta government in Argentina, as a means to boost national morale, actually invaded the Falklands and took it over for a short time. And it was a big question at the time, given that the British Empire was in the process of decolonization and was kind of starting to rot into the state you see it at today, whether UK would actually come and respond and liberate the Falklands and get it back for themselves. Well, you may remember, for those of you who are familiar with this subject, that at the time, the UK was led by a certain prime minister named Margaret Thatcher, who famously asserted, yeah, we're not going to let Argentina take over our territory. We don't care if the Falklands are geographically close to Argentina. It doesn't make it theirs. And of course, they sent in their navy. They rocked Argentina's you-know-what, took it back. And honestly, it was the last cool and great thing that the British Empire ever did, okay? And it was awesome. I'll just let an open secret. Sometimes when I need a morale boost, I literally go on my phone and watch edits of the Falklands War, okay? So big props to the UK for that. However, here's the problem. Margaret Thatcher is not in charge of Britain anymore. And if Britain's armed forces were starting to decline in the 1980s, you know the state they're in today. So here's the question. If the Falklands crisis happened once again today, we have to seriously doubt whether Keir Starmer would actually do anything if Argentina tried to invade again. And you might think to yourself, well, that's not going to happen. That was a long time ago. Well, here's the issue. All right. I want people to take notes of this. And by the way, this is partially thanks to U.S. soft power strategies. But over in Argentina, after decades of leftist rule, guess who is once again in charge of the country? A right-wing government. With recent electoral developments in Chile and a lot of the rest of Latin America, the same thing here is true. And because they're, I guess, non-Western aligned, over there being right-wing means the Falkland is our territory, and in Britain, being right-wing means the Falklands is our territory as well. So what has happened under these new regimes? Ladies and gentlemen, and this is a development as of this week, Chile's right-wing government has now declared its support for Argentina's claim over the Falkland Islands, according to a joint statement issued following a meeting between the two countries' leaders. Here we go, guys. Here we go, right? And why is that happening right now, by the way? Who knows what they're actually going to do? But if they do anything, why would it be happening right now? Why are they signaling? Why are they kind of like beating their chest at Britain? Because they fully expect that Britain's not going to respond, okay? As a matter of fact, Keir Starmer's a leftist, so he probably will buy the stupid argument about decolonization. He basically was doing that in Diego Garcia for a long time until Trump had to step in there. But here's the issue. Given everything that we understand, given the fact, by the way, that the right-wing governments of Argentina and Chile are not only U.S. allies, you could argue to an extent, they're sort of a part of some of Trump's soft power nation-building projects, right? He wants Latin America to be led by right-wing control, like Bukele, Milei, these types of characters. If Argentina wanted the Falklands, given the current state of NATO, who do you think America would side with? At the very least, I have to assume they'd be neutral, because that's the thing. Back during the first Falklands War, America did not get directly involved, but they did give support to the UK, okay? And by the way, Britain didn't really need America to get involved there. But, you know, if the whole thing happened today, you have to ask serious questions. Would the UK actually defend their own territory? And would America once again give diplomatic support to Britain? I don't think that's the case, right? So notice how, again, the results of being weak on the international stage are really coming to bite this former empire in the butt, you know? And notice how they're not garnering respect from the international community. Russia's dog walking them. Now even Argentina, of all countries, is giving them a big middle finger. This is a serious issue, and to an extent, you know, you kind of have to root for it to happen, not because I want the UK to collapse or be disgraced or whatever. Okay, I actually like the British Empire historically, but because of the fact a serious wake-up call is needed here, right? You almost have to root for that humiliation to happen, so that way in the upcoming election, it's another stain on Starmer's legacy that sees him voted out of power, and hopefully a new government, whether that's Reform or the Restore Party or whatever it is, okay, starts to take the issue of defense and a lot more seriously, including domestic issues, including migration, including crime, including their dismal economy. And maybe in the sense like this ought to be the Iranian hostage moment for the UK, right? This ought to be the 1979 crisis, the embassy situation, in a sense where it's that humiliation that is a bad thing, but you sort of need as a kick in the right direction, you know? Because that's just embarrassing, right? You did all of that in many of our viewers' lifetimes. You did all of that to defend your own territory. And now, years later, they're basically just saying, oh, it's ours again because we don't think you're going to do anything about it. And they might be right about that. What a disgrace. All we can say is that Trump tried to warn the UK. He tried to warn Europe. They didn't listen. And look what's happening now. You know, we'll repeat some of those talking points. Again, no matter how much they want to claim they're truly anti-Russia, their policy is not actually anti-Russia. Okay, it's extremely soft. It doesn't work. And then secondly, it's very easy to be a pacifist. It's easy to virtue signal for ceasefire, for peace, when you have no capacity to fight, and other countries around the world are taking notes of that. I'm just going to say that. Anyways, that said, guys, so let me know your thoughts. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace. Oh, and by the way, this is what NATO actually looks like without America, what you're watching right now. So good luck with that.